Hello once again, and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Once upon a dream, when very young, I had been explained some very unusual things by friends and others. In there, someone who identified himself as being the captain in one of my dreams told me that the earth was hollow and there was a very highly developed civilization living in there. Naturally, I have spoken about it to my elders, teachers, older friends, and my mother. None of them took me very seriously. Indeed, I was yet to discover a lot more about this. In my adult years, however, that there was something called the hollow earth theory for a very long time. Have you heard of it? It has been held that the earth was hollow, but it was not until 1968 that any sort of proof was at all forthcoming. It was in that year that some photographs taken by satellites seemed to show an enormous hole at the North Pole. Or, question is, did they? Was it a joke, perhaps? In the early 70s, Environmental Science Service Administration, or ESSA, of the United States Department of Commerce, released to the press photographs of the North Pole that had been taken by the ESSA, or ESA, 7 satellite on 23rd of November 1968. One of the photographs showed the North Pole wreathed in its customary cloud cover. A second photograph, however, showing the same area without the cloud cover, revealed an enormous black hole where the pole should have been. It could have been anything. Now, did the Environmental Science Service Administration know that their routine weather reconnaissance photographs would lead to one of the most sensational and very highly publicized controversies in UFO history? Sometimes it really is so confusing as to why such material was seen okay to release to the world when they stopped every possible development in regard to UAPs. In the June 1970 issue of Flying Saucers magazine, editor and ufologist Ray Palmer reproduced the ESA 7 satellite photographs with an accompanying article, claiming that the enormous hole shown on the photograph was real. It had long been the belief of Ray Palmer and a great many other ufologists that Earth is hollow and that UFOs, well, some of them, emerge from or return to a civilization of superior beings, hidden deep in the Earth's unexplored interior. Certainly, a mass hysteria was created, and we, the young ones, were getting really excited about these stories. Alas, we were to be silenced with a newly created edition that believing in such stories was nothing more than idiocy. Now, with an actual photograph of an enormous black hole at the North Pole, Palma was able to assert that subterranean superrays could well exist and might be reached through the holes at the north and probably south poles. They were not considering other holes. According to Palma, the ESA-7 satellite photograph was proof that an enormous hole existed, at least at the North Pole. And subsequent issues of Flying Saucers magazine, he strengthened his case by resurrecting another long-standing hollow Earth controversy involving the expeditions of Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd to the North and South Poles. Even then, we were asking if that was true, and we had huge holes at the poles, and what was likely to happen to Earth's oceans in the long run. What could really be expected beyond the poles? That's a good question. Rear Admiral Byrd, 1888 to 1957, of the U.S. Navy, was distinguished pioneer aviator and polar explorer who made the first flight over the North Pole on 9th of May 1926, and then led numerous exploratory expeditions to the Antarctic, including the first flight over the South Pole on 29th of November 1929. From 1946 to 47, he was in charge of a program known as Operation High Jump, which allegedly sighted 1,500,000 miles square, or 3,900,000 kilometers square, Antarctic territory, 25% of it seen for the first time. It was the flight of one of the exploratory parties that caused a minor sensation. And on 11th of February 1947, a snow-free area of rock covering about 100 million square miles and dotted with lakes was discovered in the Banga Hills near the Shackleton Ice Shelf. Navy press release described it as a Shangri-La and reported, erroneously, vegetation had been seen there. Byrd's most famous polar expeditions were first drawn into the Hollow Earth controversy, when a great many articles and books, notably The Hollow Earth Beyond the Poles by Amadeo Giannini and Hollow Earth by Dr. Raymond Barnard, claimed that Byrd had actually flown not across the North and South Poles, but down into the great hollows that led into the Earth's interior. Ray Palmer, quoting extensively from Giannini's book, as did Dr. Barnard, introduced to this theory in December 1959 issue of Flying Saucers, and thereafter ran voluminous correspondence on the subject. According to Giannini, Barnard, and Palmer, Rear Admiral Byrd announced in February 1947, prior to a supposed flight of 1,700 miles or 2,750 kilometers beyond the North Pole. I would like to see that land beyond the pole. That area beyond the pole is the center of the great unknown. Giannini, Barnard, and Palmer also claimed that during Byrd's supposed flight over the North Pole in February 1947, the admiral reported by radio that he saw below him not ice and snow, but land areas consisting of mountains, forests, green vegetation, lakes, and rivers. And in the undergrowth, strange animal that resembled a mammoth. As it happens, records show it is unlikely that bird ever made a flight over the North Pole in February 1947, when he was very much preoccupied with the Operation High Jump in Antarctica. Now, what is more, according to Giannini, Bernard and Palmer, in January 1956, after leading his last expedition to the Antarctic, Rear Admiral Byrd claimed that his expedition had penetrated 2,300 miles, or 3,700 kilometers beyond the South Pole. They further claimed, before his death in 1957, Rear Admiral Byrd had called the land beyond the pole that enchanted continent in the sky, land of everlasting mystery. The land, according to other Hollow Earth theorists, was actually the legendary Rainbow City, home of fabulous lost civilization. For exponents of the Hollow Earth theory, these comments mainly confirmed what they had suspected all along, that the Earth is shaped unusually at both poles, something like a donut with a depression that either goes down an enormous distance into the bowels of the Earth, or forms a giant hole running right through the Earth's core, from one pole to the other. Since, geographically speaking, it would be impossible at this stage to fly 1,700 miles, or 2,750 kilometers beyond the North Pole, or 2,300 miles, or 3,700 kilometers beyond the South Pole, without seeing water. It stands to reason, at least, according to Hollow Earth logic, that Rear Admiral Byrd must have flown down into the enormous convex depressions at the poles, and thence into the great unknown of the Earth's interior. Had he flown further, it had been claimed he would have arrived eventually at a secret UFO base belonging to the hidden super race, inhabitants of the legendary Rainbow City that Byrd had possibly seen reflected in the Antarctic sky. So, when in June 1970, Ray Palmer was able to publish satellite photographs that actually showed what seemed to be an enormous black hole at the North Pole, Hollow Earth tourists all over the world were confirmed in their beliefs. But is the Earth really hollow? And do such holes at the poles exist? The possibility that the Earth might be hollow, it may be entered through holes at the North and South Poles, and that secret civilizations still flourish inside it, is one that has fired to the imagination since time immemorial. The Babylonian hero Gilgamesh in search of immortality is said to have visited an ancestor, Utnapishtim, in the bowels of the earth. Utnapishtim is also known in some other cultures as Noah. The Greek hero Orpheus tried to rescue his dead wife, Eurydice, from an underground hell. The pharaohs of Egypt were rumored to be in touch with the underworld, which they could reach via secret tunnels concealed in the pyramids. The Incas, in flight from the rapacious Spaniards, reportedly carried much of their treasure into the inner earth, and Buddhists long believed, and still do, that millions live in Agartha, and veritable underground paradise, I would say. What of the illustrious believers? Perhaps somewhat surprisingly, the scientific world was not immune to the hollow earth theory either. Leonard Euler, an 18th century mathematical genius, deduced that the earth was hollow, that it contained the central sun and was inhabited. Dr. Edmund Halley, 1656 to 1742, discoverer of Halley's Comet and astronomer royal for England in the 18th century, also thought that the earth was hollow and that it even contained inside it 3 planets. In the early 1820s, John Clave Sims, an American, failed to obtain United States government backing for an expedition to prove his theories that the earth was hollow. But his ideas were published in 1826 in a book, The Sims Theory of Concentric Spheres, demonstrating that the earth is hollow, habitable within, and widely open about the poles. He hoped, by publishing his ideas, that he could persuade the world that the interior of the earth could be reached through large holes at the north and south poles, and the inside the earth would be found a warm and rich land, stocked with thrifty vegetables and animals, if not man. Those who jumped onto the Sims bandwagon were Cyrus Reed Teed, who founded the Hollow Earth religion, William Reed, who wrote the controversial book Phantom of the Poles, and Sims' son, who added to his father's theory even more fanciful notion that inhabitants of the inner earth were the 10 lost tribes of Israel. None of these theories was supported by anything other than wishful thinking, but they sat comfortably side by side with various works of fiction on the subject, the most notable of which were Edgar Allan Poe's narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, in which the hero and his companion have a chilling confrontation with emissaries from the interior, and Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth, in which an adventurous professor, his nephew, and a guide enter the inner earth through an extinct volcano in Iceland, and they encounter new skies seas, and giant prehistoric reptiles roaming wild in the forests. Nonetheless, the idea of Hollow Earth became so widespread that the author, Edgar Rice Burroughs, felt obliged to write Tarzan at the Earth's core, in which the famous child of the jungle went to Pellucidar, the world which lay on the inner surface of the earth and was illuminated by central sun. H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow Out of Time also brought the theme into the modern age by introducing an ancient subterranean race that dominated the earth 150 million years ago and had since, in the safety of the inner earth, invented airships and atomic-powered vehicles, as well as mastering time travel and ESP, of course. Maybe we're talking about Curious Underworld, eh? There can be a little doubt that Lovecraft's famous novel influenced the lengthy article entitled I Remember Lemuria by Richard S. Shaver, first published in March 1945 issue of Amazing Stories magazine, and claimed by the author to be fact rather than fiction. In his article, Shaver stated that the interior of the earth is laced with a network of gigantic caves, and that these are filled with a race of malformed subhuman creatures known as Deros, or abandoners, so called because they abandoned the surface earth 12,000 years ago. The Deros had once seen as being slaves of a Lemurian master race from outer space, but now occupied themselves in persecuting humans of the surface world, and were said to be responsible for some of our most momentous calamities. Shaver's insistence that Lemurian underworld actually existed, and that he had even been taken down into it by the Deros, was given enormous publicity in the United States. Where else? Leading to a resurgence of interest in the possibility of Hollow Earth and the hidden, highly advanced civilizations said to be dwelling within it. So it was perhaps not an accident that the UFO age was ushered in 2 years later, on 21st of June 1947, with a reported sighting of 5 disc-shaped, unidentified aircraft over Canadian border by Harold Dahl, and 3 days later by Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting of flying saucers over the Cascade Mountains in the northwest USA. After these 2 sightings, UFO mania swept the United States and eventually the world. 2 of the most popular theories declared that UFOs were either extraterrestrial spacecraft from some distant galaxy, or the craft of species of highly advanced beings inhabiting the interior of the Earth. According to the latter theory, the flying saucers both left and re-entered this world from theirs via enormous holes at the North and South Poles. Are there secret bases around the globe which has been kept hidden purposely, as with many other issues, for decades? One feels popularly to think that way. Such theories naturally will lead to a resurrection of belief in the lost civilizations of Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu. This was encouraged by the publication of John G. Fuller's remarkably persuasive book, The Interrupted Journey, in which the author tells the story of Betty and Barney Hill, an American couple who, during psychiatric treatment for an inexplicable period of amnesia, recalled under hypnosis that they had both been temporarily abducted by some extraterrestrials examined inside a flying saucer, UAP, and informed that the visiting aliens had secret bases located all over the Earth, some of them sited under the sea and at least in the Antarctic. This sensational case, coupled with Amy Michel's widely read Flying Saucers and the Straight Line Mystery, from which many people deduced that the saucers generally flew in north-southerly directions, strengthened the growing belief in the Arctic and Antarctic as likely locations for the secret bases of the flying saucers, or UAPs. However, we seem to still await for a conclusive proof for this. The theory of a hollow Earth certainly offers an archaic charm to the theme, but as several scientists have suggested in counter-argument, if it were so, and if there were holes at the poles, then something even more extraordinary must be there, stopping the oceans from draining into the center of our planet. Maybe it is said a little too early, we don't know. Let us not forget that there are so many unknowns in the world, let alone our own selves. Therefore, I would allow some, or at least 50-50 chance that some of those theories might be true. And with that, this session comes to an end for today. I shall be meeting you again here by the next episode. In the meantime, keep smiling and be happy. Thank you.